First of all, if you're watching this video, this is not a history lesson. This is how you could tap into your own genius zone like Da Vinci. Let's get it.
Yeah. I'm inspired. I'm inspired.
What's happening, guys? My name is Sumedh Chatterjee from the Flow Zone Academy, and I'm a flow state coach, which means that I help you feel better and perform better. Today we're talking about how to flow like Da Vinci, how to connect the dots like Da Vinci. Okay, Leonardo da Vinci, a very amazing polymath. Okay, this is what we're going to talk about. How you can be like a polymath in your own life. There's a negative bias in culture in terms of being a jack of all trades. And I understand that, master of none. I understand that mentality. However, there's such a benefit to being a polymath, and the way that I want to describe it is you're a specialist in more than a few areas, like let's say 3 areas, but you integrate all of those skill sets into one vibe, one frequency. First of all, I want you to understand the flow state triggers of pattern recognition, complexity, as well as richness of the environment. And of course, Da Vinci also had the deep embodiment factor because he was very, very passionate about anatomy and body mechanics and measurement and mathematics. I think his aesthetic approach to the human body, the Vitruvian Man, which we all know so well, the Vitruvian Man, which uses Fibonacci sequence and golden ratio, right? He's blending illustration with design, with science. I want to start off this video with a quote from Da Vinci himself, okay? Leonardo da Vinci said, and I quote, he said, "Study the science of art, study the art of science. Develop your senses, especially learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else." Realize that everything connects to everything else. Isn't this the secret to synchronicity? Because the more you're connecting and finding connections, the more likely you're going to see synchronicity and patterns in different areas. So that's how we're flowing like Da Vinci, is the more we're connecting different strands together, the more creative we're being. And creativity by itself is a flow state trigger that causes more flow state, and more flow state causes more creativity. Da Vinci knew the secret, whether he'd like to admit it or not. If he were alive today, he would be like making the Iron Man suit or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of genius that this guy had. If you ever heard of Nassim Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, right? I think that Da Vinci is truly anti-fragile. He's a polymath. You can quickly connect your skill in a myriad of ways. Polymath comes from the Greek having learned much. It also connects to the term Homo Universalis, which means the universal man. Being a Renaissance man, right? Being a Renaissance man means you have this polymath quality. You're connected to these different things, but you're integrating them all together. Someone a long time ago, I believe his name was David Botticelli or something like that. He had a very Italian name. And when he heard that I was a flow state coach, it was very interesting what he told me. He told me that, hey man, what you do is amazing work. You help people become Da Vinci's. And I had to really think about that, and I was like, hey man, wait a second. You're actually right, because what I'm doing is helping people explore their different gifts and then integrating all those gifts into one genius zone, right? One frequency, one thing that moves them forward, that connects the dots in all different areas, right? And that becomes your flow code. That becomes like your thing, your signature blueprint essence, your aura that you carry with you wherever you go. So how do you become like Da Vinci? A couple of things, okay? And I'm gonna go fast here in this video, so take notes. 1, tenacity. Tenacity combines consistency, persistence, and accountability all clumped into one, okay? So think of the highest form of leverage and urgency that you can give yourself that actually gets you moving forward, that you don't stop creating, meaning you don't stop causing something to exist. You keep causing. You keep being cause in your life. The next thing is try new things and dare to be different, dare to be bold, dare to be unique in your own skin, in your own ways. Listen, let me tell you this. If being a polymath was so ineffective, or being a generalist was so ineffective, why are the greatest and most affluent people of these different companies, right, all polymaths? It makes no sense to me. right? Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, all these people, right? They're all polymaths. They know about a bunch of different things. And they've been able to integrate it together in order to like really get that vibe out there, right? That frequency out there. So this is what I'm talking about here, is Da Vinci had this similar quality. So 3 diverse domains integrated into one skill set. My personal way of using tenacity is I will say things out publicly to risk embarrassment, right? So let's say I'm doing a water fast or a challenge or a no fap or whatever I'm doing, right? I will just say it out into the world and be like, yo, I'm doing this from now on, right? And the world can challenge me on that, and the world will hold me accountable, because if I don't follow through on that, I'm gonna look ridiculous. But if I do follow through on that, guess what? It's a benefit for me. So it keeps me on my toes, right? Being watched from an audience standpoint keeps me on my toes, and it makes me move forward. So this doesn't work for everybody. I'm just gonna put this out there, right? For some people, they can't keep that energy of the launchpad effect alive. Like, let's say they start a company, they forget why they started the company, and they fizzle out. For me, I keep that vibration growing and growing and growing each year, right? And I try to make it more exciting each year that I have this. And I think this is an important thing to do, is like get you excited about your own process again and again and again. Let's look at Da Vinci, man. He was a mathematician, he was an engineer, he was a botanist, he was a sculptor, he was an architect, he was a geologist, he was a cartographer, he was a writer. He had so many skill sets, but you know him as Leonardo da Vinci, and maybe a few classical works like helping to create the flying machine, from starting on ornithology, which is like study of birds, right, and bird flight. And years later, scientists discovered that, hey, he was actually onto something there. And also, he would help make weapons, right? The scuba suit and the machine gun. Next thing is, you want to focus for long interrupted periods of time, okay? Schedule in deep work into your calendar and actually just keep it for that, right? Keep time aside to worry, keep time aside to flow, keep time aside to work out, keep time aside, like you have to schedule in your time according to the days that you have planned. Now, if you notice, like Tesla and Da Vinci, they had very strange schedules. So you don't need to go by the, like, oh, I must get this many hours of sleep because that's what's societally conditioned, right? No, don't go by what is societally conditioned in this case, okay? If you're a genius, you're gonna have to create your own structure according to your own habits and the way that you thrive the most. Where do you thrive in your flow state the most, right? In terms of your environment, like, how are you thriving? Like, what is the time of the day when you thrive the most and you're like on point? Maybe you're a night owl, okay? Schedule in your working hours and during the night then, right? This is very, very common sense, but a lot of people don't do this, and I'm surprised that people still don't organize their time like this, right? In terms of this, like finding their own rhythm and their flow state and their schedule throughout the dips of their day, right? Energy dips. Spend more time in the acquisition of knowledge is the next thing, right? You're reading all these books and podcasts, but you're not taking any notes on them. You're not making any content by them, Like when I read all this stuff about Da Vinci, when I was doing my initial research for this video, which was very limited research, I just kind of wanted to skim over some of the things that he covered and things like that. And I wanted to specifically look at it through the flow state consultant or the specialist angle, also the flow state generalist angle, right? And break it down from that lens, right? So you want to be in an acquisition of knowledge constantly refining, feeding your brain with quality content. Don't limit yourself to one scope of study, okay? Make it in a typical combination of things that you're learning about, right? I think this was brilliant in my college, in Bennington College, right? We had this thing called a plan process, right? Really vague, I don't want to go too much into this, but it was a very hipster, liberal arts college that I went to, right? Where we would combine different topics that didn't really make sense. Like, you'd take, like, dance and science together, right? So you could study the movement or the physics of dance, and that's kind of cool. I think that's incredible. I think as a dancer, you need a little bit of science to make that skill set way more powerful, and that's what a polymath does, right? They don't just go to one area and then, okay, I'm a master of this one area, because what happens if you become the master of one area? Let's say that industry dips down, you can't pivot. You can't be versatile with that, right? You can't be like, oh, what, dodge that, right? I can always dodge that, right? When you grow older, let's say you can't move anymore and you're an athlete. How can you switch over? Maybe you go into coaching, right? Maybe, like, knowing how to pivot is so important. And I think Da Vinci did this really well. And he was really able to, he didn't have a to-do list, by the way. He had an expert list. He had a list of experts that he would speak to. Okay? That was most of his to-do list, is like, speak to this person about math. Speak to this person about, botany. It was like that. So this is why I love getting into podcasts with people and just getting into conversations with different experts from different fields, so that I get those different reference points, so that I can soak in all the glorious information from all those different areas. And it's like almost putting it into a mixie, right? And then putting it into your brain and then out into the world. And then that becomes something new and innovative and something you can really prescribe and go back to the basics, but at the same time, you're constantly growing. And there's an expansive acceleration or an exponential energy that takes you off. Just understanding that Mona Lisa was his passion project, right? He designed like a modern day synth. He designed the water wheel. He was also a theater producer, which I'm fascinated with, right? I'm the author of TPM, so I'm fascinated by the fact that he was doing the SFX for theater. Of course, he painted one of the greatest masterpieces of all time, which is The Last Supper, but he never received any kind of formal education. Okay, all self-education, right? It's interesting, the word education comes from educare, which means to lead from within. In a lot of his works, people believe that he wrote in codes and cryptography, right? He was hiding things in his different artworks and things like that. That's why the Da Vinci Code, right? That movie came from that, in a sense. He had the most influential drawings or illustrations of the human body ever made, like, the anatomical drawing of the heart and just things like this, right? Da Vinci was actually a notoriously slow painter. Okay, he took his time. So timelessness is an aspect of flow state, okay, where you lose a track of time. So the fact that he was a painter that took his time with his paintings, and in fact, there's a lot of his unreleased works, right, where he just didn't finish them, right? Adoration of the Magi is one of his paintings that got a lot of international acclaim, and allegedly, I think there was a depiction of him in the painting itself. You sort of look at this guy and you think, man, there's something wise about him, right? He has a big beard, grace, ambidexterity, using both of his hands, right? Some people say that he would write backwards, right? He would write from this side to this side, sort of like manga, right? This guy was not in the norm. He wasn't following the normal structure of things. He was constantly refining and finding his own personal edge. Another thing that he did was he followed his hunches and intuitions. Like, he'd go off into the forest, he would start to, get inspired, and he would randomly travel to somewhere else. Like, he would go on these hunches, these quests, where he was even helping certain people win the war, right? There's weird things about his sex life, but let's not go there, right? Some people believe that he was gay, and he was arrested for sodomy, but then at the same time, some people believe that he was celibate. So, I don't know, the information is kind of contradictory, so I don't know what to say about that, and let's not talk about who he was in the bedroom or whatever. Because think about this, right? Have you ever seen the comic book Dilbert? Have you ever seen Dilbert? Do you know the comic book Dilbert? He talks about business, he uses comics and illustration, dog, a talking animal, right? Focusing on the workplace culture. That's how I've been able to integrate it all into one. My positive psychology background, my coaching background, my psychology background, my theater arts background, my rapping and hip hop background and performing on stage, my social dynamics background, all of that stuff, right? I've been able to integrate it, put it into a mixer, and then bloom, right? Instead of boom, bloom, right? It's just like flowers growing. Like, that's the way you want to present your work. You don't want to just get stuck into one area and you'll be like, I guess I'll always be an engineer, right? How can you expand on the engineering and add more different lens to it, right? Like Ido Portal, right? He came up with a movement culture. He didn't just become the capoeira guy and get lodged into that one niche, right? He became that guy who was adding value to the niche of the movement, which is a very broad movement of dance, but he's studying, science. He's going to different cultures and learning dance from those cultures, right? This is what you want to have, is this curiosity, this endless, fascinating quest of wonder and childlike, fresh pair of eyes, that when you're going into these new environments, and you're seeing the richness of the environment, you're integrating and you're downloading all that information in your brain, and then you're putting it down into like maybe one word or one sentence or one drawing that you get back to in a week later, and you keep adding to this painting, right? That's such a beautiful mindset, this long-term approach of artistry, right? Of mastery. Malcolm Gladwell said 10,000 hours of mastery. I don't think that there's necessarily a pinpoint number on that, right? I think these become conventional terms. It's like saying the term like, oh, you were the 5 people that you hang with. Why 5? You know, why not 4 or 3, right? Why? But we know it is 5 because Stephen Covey said 5, right? So it's like, okay, let's just say 5. Okay, everybody in the personal development industry knows this, right? For some reason. But these are just numbers, guys. You have to actually refine and set the numbers and standards and statistics of your own metrics of your own life, and don't use anybody else's measuring tool to measure your own life progress. That's it. And just go for it. Last thing I would say is avoid being perfect. Constantly refine and ask yourself, what else? Okay? Because if you reach the end of the goal or the end of the rainbow and you think you got the pot of gold, it's not the end of the rainbow. There's always a different approach. So that what now feeling, I want you to change it to a what else feeling. Okay? It's not like, oh, what now? It's over. It's all done. It's like, what else can I add to this to make this even more epic? Right? How can I pull one strand from this area and merge it with this other area? Another thing is look after your fitness and your body. You know, Da Vinci was incredibly poised in terms of his own fitness and looking after his body. Okay? You know, the body does something, the mind follows. So he looked after his body. Guess what? His mind was rampant in terms of following through with that. He's a clean body, clean mind. I'm sure he spent a lot of time in nature too, gathering different perspectives. We're looking at bird beaks and woodpeckers and things like that, and just, you know, learning the different approaches to that. I'm giving you a lot of different elements in this video right here to work with in terms of thinking like Da Vinci, being in the flow state like Da Vinci, you know, acting on your own pure instinct and mechanical nature of like using both of your hemispheres, right? This is what a lot of geniuses do, is they use both their hemispheres. They're not purely logical and masculine, and they're not purely imaginative and feminine, right? They're using both. They're connecting the strands. They're getting that hemisphere synchronization going, right? This is one of the exercises I give people for hemisphere sync, right? And just holding that position and then breathing into it. Like I said, you know, Da Vinci is such a trailblazer. He's a pioneer. So I want you to be like the polymath. You know, don't be such a specialist and then get trapped into your niche. Start to explore different areas to make that niche even stronger, is what I'm saying, okay? I'm not saying don't be a specialist, because I am a specialist in flow state, you know? But at the same time, I learn from everything. And I try to apply those different areas to my niche, to my specialization, right? And that's what you got to do. I think the polymath energy is really powerful, and we need more Da Vincis right now, more than ever before. We need more Da Vincis. We need more innovators during this time of recession, during this time where the pandemic has struck. We need more Da Vincis. So that's why I'm making this video. I want this to be a wake-up call for you. Create the new renaissance, create the new empire, create the golden ages. Let's get it. Upward spiral, gang. May the flow be with you. May you never be the same again, and stay legendary. Let's go. Boom.